Hi everyone, and welcome to my Outriders guide for new players, where I'm going to explain some of the less obvious mechanics behind the game. I'm going to take you through the settings, explain world tier, gear, loot and mods, crafting and upgrades, classes and builds, vendors, and even a little bit of endgame as well. And while this is a guide for new players, if you're experienced, please do leave your favourite top tip in the comments down below. That would be fantastic. Oh, and if you'd like to check out my full review of Outriders, then there's a link in the top of the description down below this video. Alright then, first up, let's just tweak a couple of settings to give you a better gameplay experience. Make sure auto set maximum world tier is set to 1. We'll explain how that works in the world tier section of this guide. And make sure auto loot minimum rarity is set to common, the lowest it can go. Auto loot is a very handy feature of the game that when you press the button that's assigned to it in controls, it'll pick up any item that's dropped in the entire region that you're playing in at the moment. Very useful. Set your game default privacy to what's appropriate for you. If you have it as friends only, that means that any person on your friends list playing Outriders can jump into your game co-op without having to ask permission. Set it to closed if you don't want anyone to join you at all, and set it to open if you're happy to have random strangers from the internet come and join your games. This can be handy if you want to play a co-op experience and let the in-game matchmaker find you people to play with, but if you don't want that, make sure it's set to closed. Do turn on crossplay if you'd like to play cross-platform, PC to console for example, or PlayStation to Xbox. And also, set the cinematic camera smoothing all the way up to maximum. When I bought the game it was at 0 at default, and it gives you this horrible shaky camera in cutscenes. This will stop that altogether, and you get a nice smooth camera during the cutscenes. If you're using a controller to play Outriders, you might want to turn vibration off. I don't need any distractions to make me play worse, thank you very much. I'm quite good at that by myself. And turn the aim assist off because it really doesn't function very well in this game. I found it more of a hindrance than a help. For example, when I'm trying to get a headshot on a guy behind cover, the aim assist will sometimes flick the targeting reticle over his chest, which is behind the cover. Yeah, that doesn't help. World tier. This definitely confused me when I started the game. It's best thought of as a difficulty layer spread across the entire game. It doesn't matter where you are in the story or what part of the game you're playing at, the world tier is always a factor. Starting off at world tier 1, this actually reduces the enemy level and the dropped item level, the loot, by -2 compared to what your character level is. So basically you're meeting easier enemies. Jump up to world tier 3, enemies and loot level are at the same as you. This is considered maybe normal. And as you go up, the enemies get higher level, but so does the loot. Now, this sounds like it's going to get more difficult because when you go up the world tiers, say for example world tier 9, you're meeting enemies that are 6 levels higher than you. Sounds tough, right? Well, not really, because you're also getting gear that's 6 levels higher than you, so you can compete on them. And not only that, but the loot rarity modifier is massively increased, which means there's more chance of getting those epic and legendary drops. So for all the enemies are bigger and tougher, so is your gear, and you can take them on. And ideally you do want to level this up so that by the time you finish the entire story and side quests, you are at a maximum of world tier 15 ready to go into the expeditions, the end game. And the reason it's a good idea to do these and get these unlocked is because you get a lovely legendary item for unlocking both of these last 2 tiers. You also get other rewards for unlocking all the other ones all the way up too, so it is worth doing. Now this is kind of a difficulty level, so you can drop the world tier down at any point, and I played most of the game at world tier 6. We played in co-op, and if there was any really tough bits we just dropped it down to world tier 5 because this actually made it easier as we were geared up to the level of world tier 6, so therefore we had better gear than the enemies we're meeting at world tier 5. Does that make sense? There's no penalty for dropping the world tier at any time if you find a tough bit. Just turn it back up afterwards, and that's why I recommend having the auto set highest available tier on, so you can grind this up as you're playing through the story and the side quests. It isn't essential though. If you're finding the game tough, just happily play through at a low tier and just enjoy the ride and enjoy the story. There is no requirement to get this maximized. It's just a bonus if you do. Now when it comes to picking a class in Outriders, it really doesn't matter which one you go for the first time. They're all viable, they can all be fun when built appropriately. But it's very important that you understand each class's healing mechanics because they are different and unique. Now let's look at the Technomancer first. This guy is designed as a weapon specialist. You can actually see they have a bonus to long range weapon damage down there. And they like to use gadgets and gizmos and stuff. Their healing mechanic, which is unique to the class, is that they will recover a portion of all the damage they deal as health. This makes it one of the easier ones to heal with because anytime you do damage from any source, you get a little bit of health back. That's not the same with the others, and the ability to heal within the game is kind of limited. The Pyromancer is more like a fire mage, but with machine guns. That's how I like to think of them. You'll notice that their healing mechanic is different. You'll recover health whenever enemies marked by your skills are killed. When it says marked by your skills, it means enemies that you've set on fire, you've got burning, you've turned to ash, that sort of thing. Basically, enemies that have been affected by one of your skills. Oh, and melee does class as a skill as well. And in this case, the Pyromancer's melee inflicts burn on enemies, which is absolutely perfect for then killing them, as you'll get some health back. And that is not range limited as far as I'm aware, which is different on the next two classes, and you really need to be aware of this. The Trickster is like a close range assassin that can also manipulate time to some extent. A lot of fun to be had with this class, but for healing, you've got to get up close. As a Trickster, each enemy killed in close range heals you and grants a portion of shield. That's another unique class mechanic, which all the classes have that you need to be aware of. But with the Trickster, you also get a little bit of shield. But for healing, you've got to be up close. Unlike the other two classes we've just looked at, which heal differently, you will not heal anything unless you kill an enemy when you are close to it. That can be a little bit tricky for new players to get used to, and it also means you have to put yourself into a position of danger. Luckily, the Trickster's pretty good at getting in and out of danger, and also their melee skill inflicts slow to all enemies, again giving you a good chance to escape or get behind them. And finally, we have the Devastator, which is a close-range tank class. I say close range, all classes can use all guns and fire and attack at all ranges, I should point that out. But the Devastator is designed to get close and in the enemy's face. They get increased health and armor, which helps with that. Their melee skill also inflicts bleed, which is a very nice status. It has some good synergy with some of the skills in the class tree, which we'll talk about in a moment. And their healing mechanic is that you'll recover health from slain enemies that stood too close. And basically, it means you've got to kill an enemy in close range to get any healing. So just like the Trickster, you've got to be up close with this. Now, as for the builds, each class has 3 trees it can go down, or it can mix and match freely between any of the 3. It just has to follow some link to be able to get, you can cross links at any point. As long as you've got the points, you get 20 points to spend by the end of the game. And each class will have a tree based on firepower and guns, a tree based on anomaly, power and abilities, and something in between, kind of in flavour with the class. With the Devastator here, it's tankiness. You can reset these class points at any time. Just make sure you're out of combat. The game doesn't pause for you when you're looking in these menus. It doesn't cost anything. I just need to press delete on the keyboard on the PC. It'll reset everything. I get all those points back, and I can spend them however I want. This is great because you can play around with builds to your heart's content. So when you're leveling, I would recommend taking things that might immediately help you survive or do damage. Taking extra weapon damage, for example, or armor piercing up the weapon tree in any class is always a good idea. And the middle tree tends to have extra health or extra armor. Certainly it does in the case of the Devastator here. All trees are perfectly viable, and even a mix of trees is quite viable. You don't have to get the end tree ability, although they do tend to be quite good. But here's the thing, by the time you've leveled your character to 20 or 25, you're going to know exactly which guns you like using on that character, and you're going to know exactly which skills you like using on that character. Skills are all quite unique, some of them not very good, some of them loads of fun, all down to personal preference. So by the time you've worked out your favourite skills and your favourite way of playing the character, then you're going to know which skills and guns you want to focus on, and that's what you're going to build your final build around. The Devastator here, I absolutely love the Earthquake ability and his anomaly powers, so I went down the anomaly tree. But you might find you prefer the guns and firepower, so just go with whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. The most important thing is you build your gear and mods around your build to get the best synergy. So the loot that you pick up in Outriders not only has the obvious job of giving you better firepower and doing more damage or giving you better protection, but it also provides you with slots to put mods in, which will increase your skills and abilities, and it also needs to be broken down to give you important resources for upgrading things later on. Generally, green gear like this and below at the start of the game you'll find rusty old rubbish. You just mark that and you probably want to sell it to any vendor that you can. You can break it down, but it's nice to build up a bit of scrap, and we'll talk about why when we get to the vendors section later. Blue gear and above though comes with mods. Blue has 1 mod on, purple gear and legendary gear have 2. Notice that to the right of the toxic bullets mod on this there's a little square windows grid symbol. That means I already know this mod. You learn mods by breaking down bits of equipment which have that particular mod on. For example, on this Eventide Cleaner light machine gun, I don't know the Claymore mod. So when I break down this machine gun, I will learn that, it will go into my little library of blueprints, and I'll be able to put that mod onto any other weapon I choose. So when you've picked up a load of basic gear and you want to clear out your inventory, the basic rules are sell the green stuff to vendors, get rid of those. The blue stuff you want to always break down because that's going to provide you with mods for your modding library. And also, more importantly, it's going to provide you with resources as well. See that? I got some more leather from breaking down the armor. You get the iron from breaking down the guns. These are used to level up and improve things later on, and also to fit mods into your gear too. Purple stuff should always be broken down and never sold, because that way you will always learn any new mods, and purple stuff tends to have quite nice mods on. But also, not only that, you'll also earn some titanium as well. Titanium is used to level gear up and is very important later on. And also in the breaking down process, you have shards as well. Now let's take a look at these purple gloves. Can you see against the status power symbol, it's got the little shard diamond next to it? That means that when I break down those gloves, as well as the leather and titanium I'll also get some shards. These allow me to increase the stats of any weapons or armor I have on my character if I have the right shards for it. So if you want to craft or upgrade any weapons, go and talk to Zahidi. You'll unlock him as part of the story. Click on Upgrade My Gear. And let's pick this blue sidearm I've got here. So we're talking about the shards that we get from breaking down gear. You can actually raise the attributes of this. And now I'm not going to waste a load of points on this one because I don't use sidearms, but I can increase its armor piercing for 147 armor piercing shards. Luckily, I do have some of those. Or the status power or close range damage. You can level them all the way up, which is really, really nice and makes a big difference on something like the guns that I really use, like this light machine gun, for example. As you can see, I have maxed that out completely. And talking of upgrades as well, that gets very expensive. Say if this was only level 48 and my max gear level on this character is 49, as you can see, I can level it up to level 49. It's going to cost me some stuff. And generally speaking, it's not too bad leveling up blue gear. That's going to cost you iron. That's affordable, but leveling up purple and legendary gear is highly expensive. It's going to cost you titanium, and later on leveling up purple and this stuff is also going to cost drop pod resources, which are an endgame material, and again, they're not to be wasted unless you're absolutely flush with them. But leveling up blue stuff is good. You can then swap the variant as well if you want to make it full auto or burst fire. That applies to all the other guns. If you pick up a really nice looking assault rifle, but it's only single shot and you don't like that, well, come and change the variant of it to burst fire or full auto, whichever you prefer. It does have an effect on the range and the accuracy and stability. Different guns for different purposes. You choose whichever you like. I tend to go with full auto on most things, but burst fire assault rifles are also quite good. You can also improve the rarity. Now I can change this blue item to a purple one. Now the main advantage of turning it into a purple item is that it's going to give me another mod slot. So that's why it's really important to break down blue and purple gear when you finish using them rather than just sell them for scrap. And of course you get the mods from breaking things down as well. Modding is definitely one of the best parts of the game, but there's a few things you need to understand. You can only mod a maximum of one slot on a piece of gear. So for example, on this machine gun I've got here, I've already modded the Shadow Comet slot. So that then locks the other slot in place. As we see here, if I can't change the singularity which came on it, I can only alter the one that I've already modded. And I can do that any number of times, and it just costs a few resources to put in. For example, say I'm going to put these freezing bullets in, it's going to cost me 187 iron to do it. I don't want to put that in though, because I've got a much better mod in there already. But all these mods you learn by breaking down gear. You'll notice I don't have so many tier 3 because you get those from legendary stuff and you don't often want to break those down. When choosing mods for your gear, for your guns, just choose ones that you enjoy or give some sort of little bonus. But for your armor, it's more important to choose mods that have some synergy with the skills that you tend to use. So for my Devastator build, I really buff up Earthquake by putting as many Earthquake mods onto anything. You can only have one active mod of the same type though. Stacking them up on different bits of armor makes no difference. Unless the mod has a different name. For example, I've got Extra Quake 1 here. It's a tier 1 mod. It gives me one more use of Earthquake before it cools down. And I've got Second Quake here, which gives me one extra. So they both give me one extra use of Earthquake, but because they're named differently, that actually stacks and I have two extra uses. So the real key to making a powerful set of armor and using good mods is to build up that synergy with the class skills that you've chosen. Now in equipping gear, don't just look at the firepower value of a weapon or the armor value of a piece of armor and think that's better because it's a bigger number. Look at the 3 stats below and consider how they are going to affect your build. For example, my Devastator is an anomaly power build and I use all the skills. So I'm looking for stats like anomaly power, status power because I inflict bleed a lot, and the cooldown reduction as well. By choosing pieces of armor which focus on those stats, even if they have less armor value, I'm going to make a much more dangerous character, and it's going to be more fun to play. The gun stats maybe aren't so important to look at, that's more about the type of gun, or the ones that you prefer using, or just the mods that come on them, but do bear them in mind too. A quick note on vendors, you will find some throughout the game in cities. I wouldn't bother buying anything from them whatsoever as you're leveling up the game. There is so much loot kicking about. You will get whatever you want by just playing the next level or going down the next side quest. There's tons of it. Don't worry about it. Don't waste scrap. Don't waste resources. You'll get 2 vendors in your camp at the end game. You've got Bailey here and Tiago. Bailey sells you things for scrap. Now, you might actually want to use some of this stuff. So you can sell things to her for scrap as well. For example, I could sell this assault rifle for 17,000 scrap. I'm looking on it. I can see I already know both of those mods, so I can sell that. That's no problem. I don't think I will, though, because I quite like that one. The only time you would probably want to buy stuff from her is if you see a piece of gear which has a mod on that you don't yet know. As you can see, due to that little grid square, which I'll put an arrow on screen so you know what you're looking at, this tells me I already know all the mods on anything that she's selling. But if you find a mod that you don't have and you think, oh, that looks just what I need for my build, just go and buy it. It's no big deal. You get so much loot from the expeditions at the end. You can sell all the stuff you don't need to her for scrap, and you can buy a new piece nearly every run. Tiago works a little bit differently in that he sells you stuff for drop pod resources, which are hard enough to come by, and they're also required to upgrade your purple and legendary gear if you wanted to level up that stuff towards the end. It might be worth saving up to buy some of this. He does sell some legendary gear for your class as well, and some weapons. There's a couple of things here I don't have the mods for. I've never had these drop. Look at the cost though, 40,000 resource points, and I have 8,000. These are hard to save up for. And you should also be aware that every time you unlock a new tier of endgame expeditions, the price of these things double. So you can either buy them early when they're cheap, save up your runs and your resources and get them early, or you can not buy any at all and save up all your pods all the way through and get them at the end. Now, that's going to sound expensive, paying 80 grand for one of these, and it is. But if you buy them when they're lower level, the cost of upgrading them and leveling them up as you go is also going to be expensive and require these drop pod resources. Unless you just want to buy it to break it down to get a mod off, then yeah, that makes sense to buy it when it's cheap. But just be aware of that. And speaking of the end game, this is where you'll choose the expedition that you want to go on. At any one time, there's going to be 4 of these available, 3 normal ones and 1 that requires you to spend a few drop pod resources to go for. They do have minimum levels, so you can't do those until you've already acquired some achievements in the others. It is leveled up just like you would with World Tier, although this is not related to World Tier. This has its own thing. You don't have to have maxed out World Tier to start expeditions, but you'll notice that it does level up. It gets harder, and in the sense that it gets harder is that it is timed. When you do any particular expedition, in order to get the gold reward, you've got to beat the time it says there. Silver, the time it says there. It is worth trying to do, of course, because you get better loot. The good thing with expeditions is that even if you fail them, you still get the loot that you would have earned up to that point from killing monsters and bosses and things, mini-bosses in there. It'll appear in a chest back in camp, so don't worry about that. You'll still get the loot from them, just not as much and not as good. But it is important to know that every time that you unlock another one of these tiers here, then everything is going to get a bit tougher. The times are going to get a little bit tighter. The rewards are going to get better if you can do it. And also the cost of buying from the 2 vendors in the camp here at Endgame is going to get more expensive. As long as you understand that, that's no problem. Like I say, I don't buy much from them anyway. There is a lot of loot drops here. And if you get lucky with the legendary stuff, which is easier to get hold of the higher tiers you play at, then there's never any need to buy anything from the vendors. But the endgame expeditions are loads of fun, and one of my favourite parts of the game. Don't forget, if you've played through Outriders and have got some great advice you'd like to share, I'd love it if you could just pop it in the comments down below. I can always learn new stuff about this game, and it would be really helpful. And if you would like to see my full review of the game, then you can click the link on screen now or down in the description under the video. Thanks for watching, folks, and I'll hopefully see you again soon.